Hi readers, welcome back to Reads with Rune B. Today we will be continuing with Ember by Jessica Schmidt. It's chapter 1 today. So let's get into it. In a wooded land of old, a bustling river town lay dotted within the trees. This was the crossroads, permanent home of few, but temporary lodging of many. Those permanent residents were nearly all of a race of mortal creatures called Felidae, who built the town centuries ago to reap the location's potential for trade. For this town in Eulandial was positioned very deliberately at the meeting place of not only two large rivers, but two main roads as well. The Felidae, or cat folk, as they are known to be both clever and quiet, dealing often with money and trade, and with their sly tongues are often able to secure the most fruitful bargains. A handsome species, they come in all sorts of colors and breeds. Their tails vary in length, their ears and muzzles as well, altogether simply appearing to be bipedal cats, but with the ability to spin the smoothest of tales and tell the most convincing and wicked lies. They are the people of Eulandio. They make their living off of travelers, be it through trade and barter, or thievery and deception. Nevertheless, Eulandio was filled with a kind of people who always had a story to tell and a job to offer, and this was one of the reasons that Lederick had found himself passing through, even perhaps staying a day or so longer than necessary. And on that particular day, seated in a small local tavern, he picked up some information that would change his life forever. Bang! Through the old tavern door burst a pair of worn-out men, whispering amongst themselves. The rain rapped on the wooden roof. The swollen river had risen more than a few feet, thundering on its course without delay. The two men were sopping wet, dripping from their coats, and wetting the dirty wooden floor. It was several hours past midnight, and they caught Lederick's attention. He sat alone, his own pint hardly touched. His eyes drifted over to them, but his face remained stoic. "I'm telling you, there are at least 6 of them," spoke one of the men urgently to his comrade. The Felidae barkeep angled his head towards the men, who were speaking as if they didn't care who was listening. However, with most of the tavern's residents already asleep at this hour, there were hardly any people around who might overhear. "I'm sure you are only seeing things," scoffed the other, flipping off his hood. His hair was black and shaggy. A thick mustache crowned his mouth. "Blood-hungry hardly ever travel in groups. Why, they hardly travel in pairs, especially canids." The other man flipped off his hood as well. His eyes were wide, fearful, his hair lighter in color, with a clean-shaven face. "I'm telling you what I saw," he said, quieter this time. "And these were working together, tracking something." Leodric sat up a bit straighter at his table, lifting up his pint and taking a drink. The two men seemed to notice him then, tilting their heads towards him, pausing for a second. "What were they tracking?" Lederick asked nonchalantly, sounding bored and vaguely skeptical. He inspected his tankard closely, as if it were bothering him. The man who appeared scared looked at his friend, and then back at Lederick. I couldn't see in the dark. It was raining, and I couldn't see anything, but someone was running in a cloak, and that was it," he said. The other man shook his head again. "You were just tired, Harlan. It's been raining, and it was probably just a couple of regular canids chasing a deer or something." "No, it wasn't," countered Harlan. He wrung his hands. "I know a blood-hungry when I see one. Besides, canids aren't usually this close to a landil unless they have to be." He turned and looked at Leodric. You believe me, right? An unconscious man at a table nearby snorted, shifting a bit in his drunken state. There was a long silence in the room, except for the constant rapping of the rain. Leodric looked back at the men, pondering for a while, before shaking his head. Your friend is right, he said. It's dark and raining and late, and you might have gotten scared and seen things your mind might have fabricated in the darkness. No, I know what he saw. I know what I saw. He slammed his fist down on the table. Just you wait. I'll find someone who believes me. With that he stood, whirling around towards the stairs, his coat flared out behind him, flipping droplets of water onto the floor. He marched toward the Felidae barkeep, shoving a few coins into his paw and heading up the stairs. The man sighed, standing up, and glanced at Leodric. Sorry about that. He isn't very fond of the dark, especially by himself. Who isn't? Remarked Leodric, especially in these times. The man nodded. The name is Yasser. My brother is Harland. Sorry to have caused you any grief tonight. The last part he addressed to both Leodric and the barkeep. He smiled grimly. Enjoy your drink. He turned, walking towards the stairs and looking at the barkeep. The Catman nodded, gesturing up for him to continue, for Harland had paid enough for them both. He made it up to the third step. Before he made it up the third step, Leodric made his decision. Yes, sir, he called. The man turned his head. Yes, he said. He asked hesitantly. Where did your brother say he saw this pack of canids? Asked Leodric curiously. He raised one of his arms above his head, stretching a bit to shake off his stiffness. Only a few miles south of here, just below the river crossing, in the Weald. He said they were running through the woods when he saw them, just before he crossed the bridge. He turned completely around, facing Leodric once more. Why do you ask? Leodric shrugged. No reason, just curious about which area I should avoid in the next few days. He locked eyes with Yasser, unblinking. The man stared back, thinking. Finally he shrugged. I guess if you put any stock into this story of his, he turned back around, heading up the stairs. You have a good night. You too, muttered Leodric, too quiet for him to hear. He stared at his cup, turning it between his hands. He hardly ever touched the alcohol inside. He wasn't even quite sure why he had bought it, not being much of a drinker himself. More out of boredom than anything, he supposed. What else is a mercenary to do on a jobless night? But now it appeared as if he had received a stroke of luck with Harland's story. What better to do than rescue a poor soul from a pack of blood-hungry canids, in exchange, of course, for a reward? He shivered at the thought of it, however. Canids were not his favorite species to, take care of. Like Felidae, canids are animalistic-looking folk, with the most basic difference being that they are taken after wolves instead of cats. Aside from that, the two are different in nearly every way. While Felidae are very tactful and good with their words, canids prefer to fight first and ask questions later. Those Leodric had dealings with were kind yet blunt, and loyal as ever. However, they were fierce warriors, with nearly unlimited stamina, and a pack mentality to their core. Combine that with blood-hungry, and Leodric shuddered once more, as he stood from his table. He had only dealt with a few blood-hungry in his day. One was canid, and it was by far the nastiest to deal with. But even though it had been a canid, it had still travelled alone. Blood hungry is a common term used for any Candid or Felidae that had tasted the blood of one of the sentient creatures of the far land. By nature, once tasting blood of another sentient being, they begin to prefer that blood to all else, going out of their way to murder more innocent to feed their hunger. They remain sentient themselves, though transformed into beasts, with an uncontrollable urge to hunt and consume members of their chosen species, be it dwarves, humans, or even other canids and Felidae. However beastly and inhuman their actions, their preference for a certain type of blood makes them excellent bounty hunters, if you don't mind overlooking the innocent people that would be murdered by them in order to in the process to sate their hunger. But some have no limits on what they would do to fulfill their personal desires, no matter the cost, regardless of who they had to hire to get the job done. Blood-hungry are outcasts, feared by society, and therefore work and exist in solitude. Even the ones who control their urges are shunned by their peers, the sight of their piercing red eyes being too much for most to bear. Leodric sighed as he reached towards the ground and grabbed up his leather bag, slinging it on his shoulders over his coat. "Ramask," said Leodric, addressing the barkeep. The russet-colored Felidae swiveled his ears in his direction. "Do you know if Midiga still lives in the same house, up a couple blocks by the market?" This was a task that required more than just himself. If there was anyone Leodric could trust to back him up in all Elandil, it was Midiga. Ramask padded towards the corner of the bar where Leodric stood. "As far as I know, she still does," he confirmed with a purr. "You aren't actually going south of the river at this time of night, are you?" he asked, concerned. Ramask had known Leodric for many years, and had grown quite fond of both him and his consistent business. "You aren't Felidae, and you cannot see in the dark." "Ah, Ramask, that is what torches are for," said the mercenary with a grin, starting towards the door. Keep a pay for my room tonight, in case I return alive." He was joking, but the cat took him seriously. "Don't do anything risky," warned the Felidae ominously, as Leodric opened the door. "It's me. I'll be fine," he assured. He pulled the hood over his head and walked out into the rain. And there we have it. Chapter 1 from Jessica Schmidt, new novel, Ember. It is on pre-order from Amazon on the 13th of this month, and it goes on sale properly from the 27th. So I am doing previews. I hope you enjoy it, and a new video will be up on Friday. Laters, readers.